of a public policy dispute. It's unacceptable under any circumstances, particularly under these circumstances where President Donald Trump indicated that he would shut down the government, would be proud to do it, would take responsibility for it, and is now holding 800,000 plus federal workers hostage, holding their families hostage, holding small business owners hostage, holding farmers hostage, holding the American people who will have delayed tax refunds hostage. The government shutdown needs to end in order for us to have a responsible, mature conversation about border security. For the 10th time today, House Democrats will put on the floor of the House of Representatives bipartisan legislation that has been previously agreed to by Democrats and Republicans, progressives and conservatives, the left and the right, that would reopen those departments that are currently shut down, with the exception of the Department of Homeland Security, which we will address tomorrow. It's important to note that in today's series of bills, we will include $1.5 billion in border security measures. That includes in excess of $500 billion in infrastructure to shore up our legal ports of entry. It includes over $500 million to pay for additional immigration judges that the Trump administration has said are needed to handle the influx of individuals coming into our country. It will also include over $500 million in security, humanitarian, and other forms of assistance to the Central American Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. As you know, to the extent there is an influx of individuals, migrants, refugee seekers, and others coming into our country or endeavoring to do so, it is largely from these three countries. Both sides agree that one of the ways for us to address the situation at the border is to help improve the quality of life and the conditions on the ground for the people in those three Central American Northern Triangle countries. That is exactly what we are doing in our legislation today in a bipartisan fashion. Open the government so we can have a mature conversation about immigration reform, a mature conversation about border security, and a mature conversation about how we can fix our broken immigration system. We're committed to doing it in a bipartisan fashion. Let me now yield to our distinguished Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Chairman Jeffries, and good morning. And welcome to day 33 of the Trump shutdown. American people understand how fundamentally unfair it is to make federal workers who are so critical to our national security come to work without a paycheck. And what we're seeing in communities in my district and across the country is the crisis that is creating for those people and their families, many of whom live paycheck to paycheck. But there is another equally serious crisis brewing, and that this Trump shutdown, enabled by Mitch McConnell, is also creating its own national security emergency. He has not only taken away the paychecks of the men and women on the front line of our security apparatus, whether that's TSA, the Coast Guard, Border Patrol agents, DEA, but the FBI has put out a scathing report and the dangerous effects on their abilities to investigate and protect the American people. The FBI has been forced to furlough 5,000 workers, and that includes special agents and intelligence analysis. In their own words, they say, As FBI special agents, we dedicate our lives to protecting our country from criminals and terrorists who threaten our safety, economy, and way of life. We are honored to serve and protect the public. However, the ongoing shutdown undermines our ability to perform these duties and fund necessary operations and investigations. And they detail what they mean. That victims from domestic minor sex trafficking cases are not receiving the funding, the attention, and the investigations that they need. That 2 days ago, the Division of Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force exhausted their operational funding, having a critical impact on 2 major investigations into heroin and methamphetamine trafficking. The shutdown has eliminated any ability to operate. It's bad enough, the FBI says, to work without pay, but we can only conduct administrative functions while doing it. The fear is our enemies know they can run freely. These are just some of the stories. This echoes throughout our security for our country, whether it's cybersecurity, TSA agents, flight control, food inspections. This burgeoning security crisis for our country is caused by this reckless shutdown. It is time to open government, pay our federal security workers, and get back to work for the American people.
Thank you, Catherine. Questions?
Sure. You mentioned hostages, I don't know, 3 or 4 times when you were talking about this. The majority leader put out a whole raft of polls yesterday that show pretty conclusively that you've got the moral high ground with the public right now. But all the damage that you mentioned to those hostages, does there come a time when Democrats say, okay, we have the moral high ground, we're winning the argument, but the damage is so great, we gotta give the president what he wants to get those hostages out?
I think we've consistently taken the position that is shared by the American people, which is that it is reckless and irresponsible to shut down the government over a public policy dispute. We need to reopen the government so we can put those 800,000 plus workers back to work, stop hurting everyday Americans impacted by the departments that have been shut down. And then we've indicated we are willing to have a mature and comprehensive conversation about border security, but we cannot do it with the government shut down.
What is this?
If I could just add to that too, I think part of the concern is that if we do not have these negotiations over border security with an open government, this president will continue to use this tool. And if we give in, if we pay the ransom now, what will happen the next time there's a disagreement with this president and Congress? There were 2 years to address this in majority-held House, Senate, and White House for the president. And he waited until this moment. And his complete lack of empathy and understanding of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck, that how wrong it is to deny this work and affect our national security in this way. There is, if we negotiate by giving in to him on this, I'm afraid it will set a precedent that will be repeated.
Congressman, what is the State of the Union at this point? Will the president be coming before your chamber next week to deliver his address?
It's absolutely not clear in terms of what his present intention is, but I can say that unless the government is reopened, it's highly unlikely that the State of the Union is going to take place on the floor of the United States House of Representatives.
Follow up on the other question here about, you guys want the government open and then you can negotiate these other things. Mathematically, there aren't the votes in the Senate for a CR, certainly on the 60-vote threshold issue. How do you see getting around that? And I understand your position on wanting the government open and negotiate, but that's the reality, the mathematical reality in the Senate. How do you see being able to get over that hurdle to get to that point? Otherwise, we remain at this impasse.
It's a good thing that Mitch McConnell has finally exited the Witness Protection Program and has decided to show up and hopefully move the Senate forward at least to having a meaningful debate and discussion, which will take place tomorrow. It's my understanding, based on conversations that have been had at the highest level between House Democrats and Senate Democrats, that there is a chance that a bipartisan agreement could be reached with respect to a continuing resolution related to the Department of Homeland Security. We've indicated that we're willing to agree upon a date certain. Our suggestion has been February 28th, where we reopen the Department of Homeland Security, continue current funding levels, but allow for a real, robust negotiation to take place. Hopefully, the Senate on Thursday will see fit to proceed in that fashion. There are a growing number of Republicans in the House and the Senate who understand that great damage is being done to the Republican brand and, more importantly, to the American people because of this reckless Trump shutdown.
You mentioned the $1.5 billion for border security that you guys are going for today. That sounds pretty close to the $1.6 billion that originally, I believe the speaker said, could not pass the House. What changed, and what's different about the $1.5 billion?
Well, the $1.5 billion that will be in today's appropriations bills were negotiated on a bipartisan basis between the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. And one of the things that we've agreed to do, consistent with what our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the House have said, is bring to the floor bills that have had House input. Today, we're going to bring to the floor bills that have had input from Republican members of the House of Representatives, and that is the difference between the previous bills that have been presented, which were all negotiated on a bipartisan basis by the Senate.
When you say that you can have a mature and responsible conversation about border security after the government is open, what does that conversation include? What's on the table? Is the wall on the table?
We are willing to invest in increased infrastructure, which includes the $500 million that are in today's appropriation bill with respect to legal ports of entry. By the way, the overwhelming majority of drugs that come into this country don't come over a wall or under a wall or across the border. They come in through legal ports of entry. We're willing to have a conversation about additional personnel when considering the fact that the Coast Guard is understaffed and Customs and Border Patrol agents are understaffed, particularly as it relates to Customs. We're also willing to have a conversation about enhanced technology, which includes sensors, satellites, drones, cell phone towers, and enhanced communication capabilities. These are the things that would actually improve our border security. We're willing to have a bipartisan conversation about a comprehensive solution to border security. We are not willing to pay a $5.7 billion ransom note for a medieval border wall. That is a 5th century solution to a 21st century problem. House Democrats, like the American people, support 21st century border security.
It will no longer be a ransom note if the government is reopened. So is the wall a subject of negotiation, or could it be?
We're willing to invest in additional infrastructure, additional personnel, and additional technology.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Chairman Thompson told some of us that he and others are working on a letter to send to the president describing a new package of border security funding. Can you describe what you know about that? What do you think is in that? And it seems like, is this a new step forward in negotiations?
So what I can tell you about that is stay tuned, that we are hoping to roll that out this week, that it will be setting forth a path forward out of this and building on what we have been trying to put forward as the chairman just reviewed. Let's strengthen our ports. We know that is where most of the illegal drugs in this country come through. We want to make real differences in border security. As the El Chapo trial has showed us, tunnels are a far bigger issue than walls. So let's have that discussion. But what we cannot do is we can signal and put forth our plans, and you should stay tuned for that. But let's also make sure that we are paying these federal workers. There is a real threat to our country, and it comes from not paying the people who are controlling our air towers, that are TSA agents, that are patrolling our borders, the Coast Guard, and all of it, search and rescue, it's interdiction focus. The fact that in my home state, at the largest Coast Guard base in Boston, the community has opened a food pantry to feed those families. It's a disgrace. And what this president doesn't understand is that in his, quest to seek approval from certain far-right commentators, he is endangering the American security and endangering the economic lives of those who have vowed to serve and protect us.
Last question.
Chairman Thompson said that proposal could include more than $5 billion for border security. Is that something that the House Democrats are prepared to support?
I'm going to defer to Chairman Thompson. He is yet to brief the entirety of the House Democratic Caucus on that proposal. Our focus right now is on making sure that we pass these bipartisan appropriations bills that will be on the floor later on this afternoon, which, as I indicated, do provide an additional $1.5 billion in border security measures. We will then take up tomorrow a continuing resolution that will reopen the Department of Homeland Security, continue it through February 28th, give us the space to negotiate, and include current border security funding measures at the level that existed in the prior Congress. Thank you, everyone.